High Chancellor Kethmiron adjusted the crystalline viewing apparatus with one of his four-jointed appendages, his compound eyes reflecting the pale light emanating from the holographic display. The council chamber of the Veltharian hegemony hummed with the low vibrations of 1,000 worlds worth of data flowing through their quantum networks. Before him, suspended in three-dimensional splendor, rotated a small blue-green marble that had captured their attention for reasons that still puzzled the greatest minds of their civilization. Another backwater system, Fleet Admiral Vexthul remarked, his carapace clicking as he shifted his considerable bulk in the chair designed to accommodate his species' unique physiology. The inhabitants have barely mastered chemical propulsion. Their primitive radio signals indicate they haven't even achieved true interstellar communication. Kethmiron's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement among his people. The Veltharian had been the dominant force in the Andrus galaxy for over 50,000 standard cycles, their empire spanning 1,200 star systems and encompassing 47 different species. Each world that had joined their hegemony had done so after demonstrating some measure of technological or cultural sophistication. This small planet, designated by its inhabitants as Earth, showed none of the traditional markers of a spacefaring civilization. Yet something draws our sensors to them repeatedly, interjected scientist Kraldun, her biomechanical implants glowing softly as she accessed the vast databases of their observation networks. The electromagnetic signatures are unusual. Not in their intensity, but in their patterns. There's an underlying complexity that our models struggle to interpret. The hologram shifted, zooming in to show the planet's surface. Sprawling cities dotted the continents, connected by networks of transportation that seemed crude compared to the energy-based transit systems used throughout the hegemony. Yet there was something about the organization, the mathematical precision of their urban planning, that suggested a deeper intelligence at work. They wage wars among themselves, Vexthul observed, his tone carrying the dismissive cadence reserved for species deemed unworthy of consideration. Primitive chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles. Their largest vessels can barely reach their own moon. What threat could such creatures possibly pose to our empire? Kethmiron remained silent, though something in the way the humans arranged their defensive installations troubled him. There was a pattern there, a strategic thinking that seemed to anticipate threats from directions they shouldn't even be aware of. His people had encountered thousands of developing civilizations, and most followed predictable patterns of growth and expansion. Earth's inhabitants were different in ways he couldn't articulate. High Chancellor, Kraldun's voice carried a note of excitement that made her biomechanical components pulse more rapidly. I'm detecting new activity in their outer system. Something large is moving beyond their asteroid belt. The hologram reconfigured, expanding to show the entire solar system. There, barely visible against the cosmic background, something massive was indeed moving with purposeful intent. The object was unlike anything in their databases, its configuration defying conventional understanding of spacecraft design. Where Veltharian vessels emphasized efficiency and organic curves that worked in harmony with spacetime itself, this construct appeared almost brutally geometric, as if its creators had imposed their will upon the very fabric of reality through sheer mathematical precision. Impossible, Vexthul breathed, his carapace plates shifting nervously. Our deep space monitors would have detected any vessel of that size entering their system. Nothing that large should be able to achieve sustained propulsion without massive energy expenditures that would be visible from 1,000 light-years away. But as they watched, the massive object continued its stately progression toward the edge of their galaxy, moving with a confidence that suggested its builders had already mapped every gravitational anomaly and spatial distortion along its path. The ship, for it was unmistakably a ship, despite its alien configuration, seemed to be following routes that shouldn't exist, taking shortcuts through space that violated everything the Veltharian understood about interstellar navigation. Contact AmbassadorNym Sarah, Kethmiron commanded, his voice carrying the weight of growing concern. Have her prepare the diplomatic protocols for first contact. And alert our border fleets. I want to know the moment that vessel crosses into our space. As the council dispersed to carry out his orders, Kethmiron remained before the holographic display, watching Earth's mysterious creation move through space with the grace of something that belonged there. For the first time in his 300-cycle career as High Chancellor, he found himself wondering if their assumptions about primitive civilizations needed revision. The ship's very existence suggested that humanity possessed technologies and capabilities that their surveillance networks had completely failed to detect. Deep in the quantum-encrypted channels of the hegemony's communication networks, warnings began to propagate across 1,200 worlds. The age of unchallenged dominance in the Andrus galaxy was about to face its first true test, and it would come from a species they had dismissed as barely worthy of attention. Captain Zorik Havenspire stood on the observation deck of the UES Meridian's Edge, watching the last of Earth's yellow sun fade into the stellar background as their ship transitioned into the hyperspatial corridors that would carry them beyond the galactic rim. The massive vessel around him hummed with the contained power of technologies that had taken humanity 3 centuries to develop in secret, hidden from the prying sensors of civilizations that had been watching their world with growing interest. "Final systems check complete, Captain," reported Dr. Nalith Corvain, her fingers dancing across the bioneural interfaces that connected her consciousness directly to the ship's artificial intelligence networks. "All quantum tunnel generators are operating within optimal parameters. The chronosync drives are holding steady at 97% efficiency." Havenspire nodded, though his attention remained fixed on the viewport. Few among his crew truly understood the magnitude of what they were undertaking. For generations, humanity had detected the electromagnetic signatures of vast galactic civilizations, their radio telescopes picking up fragments of communications that revealed the existence of technological societies spanning thousands of star systems. But rather than reaching out, Earth's leaders had made a different choice. "How long until we reach the Andrus galaxy perimeter?" he asked, turning toward Commander Yold Grimwater, whose responsibilities included navigation through the complex hyperspatial manifolds that connected distant regions of spacetime. 47 hours, assuming we maintain current trajectory parameters," Grimwater replied, her augmented neural implants processing navigation data faster than any purely biological mind could manage. "The quantum entanglement beacons are functioning perfectly. We'll be able to maintain real-time communication with Earth Command throughout the journey." The irony wasn't lost on Havenspire that they were using technologies the galaxy's dominant civilizations would consider impossible. Humanity's approach to scientific development had always been different from what their xenobiological studies suggested was normal among spacefaring species. Where others seemed to follow predictable paths of technological advancement, building upon established principles in logical progression, humans had consistently chosen to pursue seemingly impossible theoretical frameworks that shouldn't have yielded practical applications. Engineer Brix Thornwick emerged from the depths of the ship's core sections, her environmental suit still radiating heat from proximity to the exotic matter containment systems that powered their journey. "The quantum vacuum manipulators are performing beyond design specifications," she reported, her voice carrying a note of professional satisfaction. "We're actually exceeding theoretical maximum efficiency by 12%. Any explanation for the variance?" Corvain asked, her consciousness still partially merged with the ship's sensor networks. "The exotic matter seems to be responding to our intentions as much as our engineering," Thornwick replied with a shrug. "It's as if the universe wants us to succeed in this mission." Havenspire knew the feeling she was describing. Throughout humanity's secret technological development, their scientists had consistently encountered phenomena that seemed to violate known physical laws, yet somehow worked perfectly when applied with human intuition and creativity. Their physicists called it the consciousness interface effect, though none could adequately explain why human mental patterns seemed uniquely suited to manipulating certain aspects of quantum mechanics. The observation deck's holographic displays activated, showing real-time images of the Andrus galaxy growing larger as they approached. Even from this distance, the electromagnetic signatures of their destination civilizations were clearly visible, streams of organized energy that spoke of technologies beyond anything Earth's observers had imagined possible. "They've been watching us for decades," Havenspire mused aloud, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the approaching galaxy. Their observation posts at the edge of our solar system have been collecting data on human civilization for longer than most of our crew have been alive. And they've consistently underestimated us, Grimwater added, her voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. Their surveillance focuses on our most primitive technologies while completely missing the real innovations happening in our deep research facilities. The truth was that humanity had deliberately cultivated this misperception, maintaining the facade of a primitive civilization struggling with basic chemical propulsion while simultaneously developing technologies that operated on principles their watchers couldn't even detect. Earth's governments had made the decision early in the 22nd century that if they were going to enter a galaxy dominated by established civilizations, they would do so from a position of strength rather than as supplicants seeking acceptance. "Contact from Earth Command," Corvain announced, her bioneural interfaces glowing as she received the transmission through their quantum entanglement network. "Final authorization for Protocol 7 has been confirmed. We are cleared to proceed with full disclosure upon first contact." Protocol 7 represented humanity's most carefully guarded secret, the true extent of their technological capabilities. For decades, Earth scientists had been developing weapons, defenses, and propulsion systems based on theoretical frameworks that seemed to work only when implemented by human consciousness. Their ship, the Meridian's Edge, was just the first visible manifestation of capabilities that had remained hidden from galactic observation. "Time to contact?" Haven Spire asked. 18 hours until we cross their outermost sensor networks, Grimwater replied. "They'll detect us the moment we enter their space, though they probably won't understand what they're seeing until it's too late to prepare adequate responses." As the Meridian's Edge continued its journey toward a galaxy that had never faced a challenge to its established order, its crew prepared for a first contact scenario that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. Behind them, Earth waited in apparent primitive ignorance, while ahead lay civilizations that were about to discover that their assumptions about humanity had been catastrophically wrong. Ambassador Nymsara's bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns of extreme agitation as she studied the incoming sensor data from their perimeter monitoring stations. The Veltharian diplomatic protocols she had spent 2 centuries perfecting seemed woefully inadequate for what was approaching their galaxy. The massive vessel that had emerged from the primitive Earth system was unlike anything in their extensive databases of known spacecraft configurations. "The energy signatures make no sense," reported the station's chief analyst, his 4 arms gesturing frantically at the holographic displays surrounding them. "Whatever propulsion system they're using operates on principles we've never encountered. Our quantum resonance detectors can't even establish a baseline for analysis." The approaching ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the hegemony's largest dreadnoughts, yet it moved through space with an elegance that suggested perfect mastery of gravitational manipulation. More disturbing was the fact that it had appeared on their sensors without any warning from their deep space monitoring networks. Either humanity possessed stealth capabilities far beyond anything the Veltharian could achieve, or their vessel operated using principles that rendered conventional detection methods useless. "Have we established communication protocols?" Nymsara asked, her translator implants already adapting to accommodate the primitive language structures their linguists had decoded from Earth's radio transmissions. "Attempting contact now," replied the communications specialist, though his expression suggested little confidence in success. "Their vessel isn't responding to any of our standard diplomatic frequencies. It's as if they're deliberately ignoring our signals." Through the viewing portal, the human ship became visible as more than just a sensor reading. Its hull was a study in geometric precision that seemed to bend space around it in subtle ways that made direct observation strangely difficult. Where Veltharian engineering emphasized harmony with natural forces, this construct appeared to have been built by beings who viewed the universe as something to be conquered through applied mathematics and sheer engineering audacity. "Sir," the analyst's voice carried a note of panic that sent warning pheromones through the station's atmosphere. "The vessel is broadcasting something on frequencies we've never seen used for communication. The patterns are, they're rewriting our sensor networks as we watch." Nymsara moved quickly to the primary console, her diplomatic training temporarily forgotten as she witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. The human ship wasn't just communicating, it was somehow interfacing directly with their technology, accessing information systems that were supposed to be isolated from external contact. More alarming, it was doing so without triggering any of their security protocols, as if their defensive system simply couldn't recognize what was happening to them. "Ambassador," a new voice spoke from the station's communication arrays, the words formed in perfect Veltharian syntax despite coming from an obviously alien source. "I am Captain Zorik Havenspire of the United Earth ship Meridian's Edge. We come seeking dialogue with the Veltharian hegemony regarding humanity's place in this galaxy." The fact that the human could speak their language was impressive but not unprecedented. Many species developed translation capabilities before achieving interstellar travel. What sent ripples of shock through the monitoring station was the realization that he was somehow accessing their communication systems without permission, broadcasting directly through supposedly secure channels while simultaneously maintaining complete control over the conversation. "Captain Havenspire," NYM Sarah replied, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure while her technical staff worked frantically to understand how their systems had been compromised. "I am Ambassador NYM Sarah, authorized to speak for the hegemony in first contact situations. Your arrival in our space is unexpected." "I imagine it is," came the response, and there was something in the human's tone that suggested amusement at their confusion. "Your observation posts have been monitoring our world for several decades, but you've been looking in the wrong directions. We've been aware of your surveillance for quite some time." The implications of that statement sent alarm signals racing through the station's networks to Hegemony Command. If humanity had been aware of their observation activities, then their apparent primitive status had been a deliberate deception. More troubling was the question of what else they might have been hiding while presenting themselves as a species barely capable of reaching their own moon. "We would welcome formal contact with your government," NYM Sarah managed, falling back on standard diplomatic procedures despite the increasingly surreal nature of the situation. "Perhaps you would accompany me to our primary diplomatic facility for proper negotiations." "That won't be necessary," Havenspire replied, and the monitoring station's viewscreen suddenly displayed the image of a being that looked remarkably similar to the humans in their biological databases, though there was something in his eyes that suggested capabilities far beyond what their xenological studies had predicted. "We've already established communication links with your High Chancellor and Fleet Admiral. This conversation is being conducted simultaneously across 1,200 worlds." The impossibility of that claim struck NYM Sarah like a physical blow. The hegemony's communication networks were quantum encrypted and isolated, protected by technologies that had taken millennia to develop. No external force should have been able to access their governmental communication channels, let alone broadcast across their entire civilization simultaneously. "How?" she whispered, her diplomatic training finally failing her completely. "The same way we've been hiding our true capabilities from your sensors," Havenspire replied, his expression growing more serious. "Humanity has always approached problems differently than other species seem to. Where you see impossible barriers, we see engineering challenges waiting for creative solutions." On the viewing screens, the massive human vessel continued its approach toward the heart of their galaxy, moving with the confident grace of something that belonged in spaces where lesser civilizations feared to venture. Behind it, stretched across the cosmos in formations that spoke of careful planning and vast resources, more ships were becoming visible as they dropped their concealment systems and revealed the true extent of humanity's presence. "Welcome to our galaxy, Captain," NYM Sarah said finally, though she was beginning to suspect that humanity's arrival would prove to be less of a visit and more of a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. High Chancellor Kethmiran found himself in the unprecedented position of conducting emergency sessions with his council while simultaneously attempting to process the impossible data flowing from every sensor network in their space. The human fleet, for it was unmistakably a fleet now, with dozens of vessels materializing from what had appeared to be empty space, was systematically demonstrating capabilities that challenged everything the Veltharian thought they knew about the laws of physics. Their vessels are operating inside our defensive perimeter without triggering a single early warning system, Fleet Admiral Vexthal reported, his carapace plates clicking nervously as he processed tactical information that made no strategic sense. They're not bypassing our sensors so much as existing in a state our detection methods can't even recognize. Dr. Kraldun's biomechanical implants were overloading from attempting to analyze the data streams the human ships were generating. High Chancellor, they're using quantum manipulation techniques that our theoretical physicists insist should be impossible. Their engines appear to be creating localized space-time distortions that allow them to move through dimensions we didn't know existed. The holographic display showed the human formation approaching their core worlds with a precision that spoke of perfect knowledge of their defensive installations and fleet positions. More disturbing was the growing realization that humanity's ships were somehow interfacing directly with Veltharian technology, accessing information systems that should have been completely isolated from external contact. They know everything, Scientist Kraldun continued, her voice carrying a note of professional awe mixed with growing terror. Ship positions, defensive capabilities, communication protocols, even the quantum encryption keys we use for our most sensitive military communications. It's as if they've been studying our technology for centuries rather than decades. Kethmiran activated his personal communication array, directing his thoughts toward the impossible presence that had somehow inserted itself into their secured governmental networks. Captain Haven Spire, your arrival has created considerable concern among my people. Perhaps you could explain the nature of your technology and your intentions in our space. The response came not through their communication systems but somehow directly into his consciousness, bypassing his auditory processing entirely. High Chancellor, humanity's intentions are quite simple. We come seeking our place among the galactic community, though perhaps not in the way you might expect. Your capabilities suggest you could take whatever place you desire, Kethmiran replied, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure while his tactical advisors reported increasingly impossible readings from the human fleet. That's the difference between humanity and apparently every other species you've encountered, came Havenspire's response, and now his image appeared on their holographic displays, not transmitted through their systems but somehow generated directly within their consciousness. We could indeed take what we want. But we prefer to earn what we receive. Fleet Admiral Vexthal leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the strange energies emanating from the human ships. Your vessels are demonstrating technologies that our scientists considered theoretically impossible. How long has your species possessed such capabilities? Defined possess, Dr. Nalith Corvain's voice joined the conversation, her bioneural interface systems apparently capable of communicating across interstellar distances without any visible transmission medium. Human technology doesn't work the same way yours does. We don't really control our tools so much as collaborate with them. The statement sent ripples of confusion through the council chamber. Every known civilization developed technology through the application of scientific principles to material engineering. The idea that humans somehow collaborated with their tools suggested a fundamental difference in their approach to manipulating reality. Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful, suggested Commander Yold Grimwater, and suddenly the space around the Veltharian command center was filled with impossible geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than their perceptual systems could process. These are the mathematical frameworks we use for our basic engineering, Engineer Brix Thornwick explained, her consciousness somehow manifesting directly within their chamber despite being physically located on a ship thousands of light-years away. Your species appears to approach technology as a way of working with natural laws. We approach it as a way of requesting that natural laws work with us. Kethmiran felt something approaching terror as he began to understand the implications of humanity's technological philosophy. If they were somehow capable of negotiating with the fundamental forces of reality rather than simply obeying them, then their capabilities were essentially unlimited by any conventional understanding of physical constraints. "What do you want from us?" he asked, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic protocol. "Recognition," Haven Spire replied simply. "Your civilization has established itself as the dominant power in this galaxy. We respect that achievement. But we require acknowledgement that humanity brings something new to the galactic community, something that might benefit all species rather than threatening them. And if we refuse such recognition? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any threat could have been. Around them, the human fleet continued its approach toward the heart of their civilization, moving with the casual confidence of beings who had already determined the outcome of any possible conflict. "High Chancellor," came Havenspire's voice after a long pause, "I think you'll find that humanity rarely requires anything from unwilling partners. We prefer to demonstrate value rather than impose it." As the Council watched, human vessels began performing maneuvers that redefined their understanding of what spacecraft could accomplish, dancing through spacetime with a grace that suggested their pilots were somehow directly interfacing with the fabric of reality itself. The age of Veltharian dominance in the Andrus galaxy was clearly coming to an end, replaced by something entirely unprecedented in their long history of galactic politics. The emergency session of the Veltharian High Command had been running for 18 consecutive hours, and Kethmiran could feel the strain affecting every member of his council. Reports flooded in from across their territory as human vessels appeared in systems that should have been impossible to reach without using established hyperspace routes that were heavily monitored and defended. "They're not conquering," Fleet Admiral Vexthul reported, his tone reflecting a mixture of relief and growing confusion. "The human ships arrive, establish some form of communication with local authorities, conduct what appear to be scientific exchanges, and then, leave. But they're doing something to our technology wherever they go." Dr. Kraldun's biomechanical implants pulsed rapidly as she processed data from across their empire. "The modifications they're making to our systems are improvements, High Chancellor. Efficiency increases of 20 to 30% across all sectors where they've made contact. They're not damaging our infrastructure, they're upgrading it." The implications were staggering. In less than a day, humanity had demonstrated the ability to move freely throughout Veltharian space, access their most secure systems, and improve technologies that had taken their civilization millennia to develop. Yet they were using these capabilities not for conquest but for what appeared to be diplomatic outreach of an unprecedented nature. "Sir," the communication specialist announced, his voice tight with controlled panic, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the research installation at Vexmora Prime. They report that the humans have shared theoretical frameworks that could revolutionize our understanding of quantum mechanics." Kethmiran activated the communication link, and found himself speaking directly with Chief Researcher Thalven, whose 4 arms gestured frantically as he attempted to describe what he had witnessed. "High Chancellor, the human scientists arrived approximately 6 hours ago and requested permission to observe our quantum manipulation laboratories. Within 3 hours, they had identified 17 fundamental errors in our theoretical framework and provided mathematical proofs that our physicists are still attempting to understand." "Errors?" Kraldun interjected, her professional pride clearly stung by the implication that their science was somehow flawed. "Not errors exactly," Thalven clarified, his excitement making his bioluminescent patches flicker rapidly. "More like, limitations in our perspective. They see connections between quantum states that we've been treating as separate phenomena. Their mathematics suggests that consciousness itself plays a role in quantum mechanics that we've never considered." The revelation sent shock waves through the command center. If human science operated on principles that incorporated consciousness as a fundamental force rather than simply an emergent property of complex neural networks, then their technological capabilities were based on an entirely different understanding of reality itself. "Captain Havenspire," Kethmiran called out, directing his communication toward the human fleet's flagship. "Your people are sharing advanced scientific knowledge with our researchers. This level of openness is unusual in first contact situations." "High Chancellor," came the immediate response, Havenspire's consciousness somehow manifesting within their chamber with an ease that their security systems couldn't even detect. "Humanity's approach to galactic diplomacy is based on mutual benefit rather than competition. We've observed your civilization for long enough to understand that the Veltharian value knowledge and scientific advancement above territorial expansion. But why share technologies that clearly give you strategic advantages? Because knowledge shared becomes knowledge multiplied," Dr. Corvain's voice joined the conversation. Human science advances faster when we have partners to collaborate with rather than subjects to dominate. Your people think in ways that complement our own approaches to understanding reality. The strategic implications were becoming clear to Kethmiran, though they challenged everything he thought he understood about interstellar politics. Humanity wasn't seeking to replace the Veltharian hegemony, they were proposing to transform it into something unprecedented in galactic history. "You're suggesting a true partnership," he said slowly, testing the concept aloud. "We're demonstrating one," Commander Grimwater replied, and suddenly the holographic displays showed real-time images from across their territory. Wherever human ships had made contact, Veltharian and human scientists were working together on projects that neither species could have conceived independently. "Your transportation networks could be improved by 60% efficiency if you incorporate quantum tunneling principles we've developed," Engineer Thornwick's consciousness manifested alongside the others. "Our manufacturing processes could benefit from your expertise in biomechanical integration. Together, we could develop technologies that neither species could achieve alone." Fleet Admiral Vexthul shifted nervously in his chair. "And if our partnership proves incompatible?" The silence that followed was heavy with implications, though not the threatening kind Kethmiran had expected. Instead, there was something almost sad in the pause before Haven Spire responded. "Then humanity will continue on our path alone, as we have for centuries," he said finally. "But we've studied your people long enough to believe that won't be necessary. The Veltharian have always chosen knowledge over conquest, cooperation over domination. That's why we chose to approach your civilization first." "First?" Kraldun asked sharply. "There are 47 species in your hegemony," Corvain explained. "If our partnership with the Veltharian proves successful, we'll extend similar offers to each of them. If not..." She paused, and the implications hung heavy in the chamber's atmosphere. Kethmiran realized he was witnessing humanity's opening gambit in a transformation of galactic politics that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. They weren't conquering the Veltharian hegemony, they were offering to help it evolve into something greater than either species could achieve alone. The question was whether his people were ready for such a fundamental change in their understanding of what civilization could become. The revelation came not through their communication systems but through a direct interface that bypassed every security protocol the Veltharian had developed over millennia of technological advancement. Dr. Kraldun found herself somehow connected to Dr. Nalith Corvain's consciousness, experiencing human scientific methodology from the inside rather than simply observing its results. "Your people think in straight lines," Corvain's thoughts merged with Kraldun's own neural patterns, creating a hybrid perspective that was simultaneously alien and familiar. "You see problems and develop solutions through logical progression. Humans think in spirals, approaching understanding from angles that shouldn't mathematically exist." The experience was overwhelming. Through Corvain's consciousness, Kraldun could perceive quantum mechanics not as a set of abstract principles but as a living framework that responded to conscious observation and intent. The mathematics that governed human technology weren't just equations but collaborative agreements between sentient minds and the fundamental forces of reality. "Impossible," Kraldun whispered, though even as she spoke the word, she could feel her understanding of physics reshaping itself around concepts that had been hidden from Veltharian science for thousands of years. "Not impossible," Corvain replied gently. "Simply approached from a direction your species hadn't considered. Consciousness isn't separate from quantum mechanics, it's one of the fundamental forces that determines how quantum states resolve into observable reality." In the command center, High Chancellor Kethmiran watched his chief scientist undergo what appeared to be a profound transformation of understanding. Her biomechanical implants were adapting in real time to accommodate new forms of data processing, evolving beyond their original design parameters as they interfaced with human technological concepts. "What are you doing to her?" Fleet Admiral Vexthul demanded, his carapace plates shifting into defensive positions as he witnessed changes in Kraldun that he couldn't comprehend. "Teaching," Captain Haven Spire replied, his consciousness manifesting with an intensity that seemed to fill the entire chamber. Dr. Corvain is showing Dr. Crowdon how human consciousness interfaces with quantum mechanics. It's not a process we can adequately explain through language, it requires direct experience. High Chancellor, Crowdon spoke suddenly, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. I can see their ships now. Not just their physical presence, but how they exist in quantum space. They're not traveling through dimensions, they're convincing spacetime to reshape itself around them. The implications hit Kethmiran like a shock wave. If humanity could somehow negotiate with the fundamental forces of reality, then their technological capabilities were limited only by their imagination and will. More disturbing was the growing realization that they were sharing this knowledge freely, transforming Veltharian science through direct consciousness interface rather than keeping their advantages secret. Why? He asked simply, the word encompassing all of his confusion about humanity's motivations. Because isolation is inefficient, Engineer Brix Thornwick's presence joined the expanding network of consciousness that was somehow filling their command center. Human advancement accelerates when we have partners who think differently than we do. Your people's approach to biomechanical integration could revolutionize our medical technologies. Our consciousness-based physics could expand your understanding of reality by orders of magnitude. You're changing us, Vexthul observed, his tone carrying both awe and underlying concern. You're changing yourselves, Commander Grimwater corrected. We're simply providing frameworks that allow your natural scientific curiosity to explore directions it couldn't reach before. The transformations you're experiencing are expressions of capabilities your species always possessed but couldn't access. Crowdon suddenly stood, her movement fluid in ways that suggested fundamental changes in how her consciousness related to her physical form. High Chancellor, I need to return to my laboratory immediately. There are experiments I must begin, theories I must test. The quantum resonance chambers could be modified to achieve efficiency levels we never imagined possible. Is she still herself? Kethmiran asked, addressing the human consciousness that seemed to permeate their space. More herself than she's ever been, Corvain replied. Consciousness expansion doesn't diminish individual identity, it reveals the full scope of what that identity was always capable of becoming. Through the command center's displays, reports were flooding in from across the hegemony. Wherever human ships had established contact, similar transformations were occurring among Veltharian scientists and engineers. Not conquest, not replacement, but evolution guided by collaborative understanding between species that approached reality from fundamentally different perspectives. You're not just sharing technology, Kethmiran realized. You're sharing consciousness itself. Consciousness can't be shared, Havenspire corrected gently. But it can be expanded through contact with perspectives that operate on different principles. Your people are discovering aspects of awareness that were always present but hidden beneath assumptions about the nature of reality. And the cost? For the first time since the human fleet had arrived, there was genuine sadness in Havenspire's response. The cost is the end of certainty. Once consciousness expands to encompass new understandings of reality, it can never contract back to its original limitations. Your civilization will never again be able to see the universe through the narrow perspective that defined your previous scientific advancement. Kethmiran felt the weight of decision pressing upon him. Humanity was offering the Veltharian hegemony a transformation that would fundamentally alter their species' relationship with reality itself. The benefits were obvious, but the irreversible nature of the change meant that accepting would commit his people to a future they couldn't predict or control. Around him, his advisors were already beginning to show signs of the consciousness expansion that contact with human awareness seemed to trigger. The choice was no longer whether to accept humanity's offer, but whether to guide the transformation that was already beginning to reshape their civilization. The transformation of Veltharian space proceeded with an elegance that surprised even Captain Havenspire. Across 1,200 worlds, the integration of human consciousness-based technologies with Veltharian biomechanical systems was creating hybrid innovations that exceeded the capabilities either species could have achieved independently. Status report from the Outer Rim territories, Commander Grimwater announced, her consciousness interfacing directly with the quantum communication networks that now span their combined civilizations. The mining operations on Kethvar Prime have achieved productivity increases of 300% after implementing consciousness-guided extraction protocols. Dr. Corvain's presence materialized within the Meridian's Edge's command center, though she was physically located on a research station near the Veltharian homeworld. The biological integration experiments are exceeding all projections. Dr. Kraldun's team has developed biomechanical neural interfaces that allow direct consciousness interaction with quantum field manipulators. Engineer Thornwick looked up from her workstation, where she was collaborating with Veltharian engineers on propulsion systems that operated on principles neither species had previously imagined. The joint engineering projects are producing technologies that seem to anticipate our needs before we're consciously aware of them. It's as if our combined consciousness is developing a form of technological intuition. Havenspire nodded, though part of his attention was focused on monitoring the broader implications of their cultural integration. The success of the Veltharian partnership had attracted attention from other civilizations throughout the Andrus galaxy, but not all of that attention was positive. Captain, Dr. Corvain's tone carried a note of concern that immediately focused his attention. We're detecting massive fleet movements from the Zephyrian Empire. Their ships are taking defensive positions along their borders, and their communications indicate they view our partnership with the Veltharian as a potential threat. The Zephyrians represented a different approach to galactic civilization than the Veltharian hegemony. Where the hegemony emphasized scientific advancement and cooperative integration of member species, the Zephyrian Empire was built on military dominance and hierarchical control. Their reaction to humanity's presence was predictably hostile. How large a fleet are we looking at? Commander Grimwater asked, her consciousness already interfacing with their long-range sensor networks. Approximately 15,000 warships, came the response from High Chancellor Kethmiran, whose consciousness had become a regular presence in their planning sessions. The Zephyrian military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force rather than technological sophistication. They appear to be preparing for a conventional military response to what they perceive as territorial expansion. Havenspire felt the familiar weight of command decisions that could reshape the future of galactic civilization. Humanity had approached the Veltharian with peaceful intentions, seeking partnership rather than conquest. But their success had apparently triggered fears among other galactic powers who saw consciousness-based technological advancement as a threat to established political structures. Options? He asked, directing the question toward the hybrid human Veltharian consciousness network that had evolved during their collaboration. Military response would be disproportionate. Fleet Admiral Vexthal's presence joined their planning session, his consciousness now enhanced by integration with human awareness techniques. Our combined fleet capabilities could neutralize the Zephyrian threat, but doing so would validate their fears about our aggressive intentions. Diplomatic contact has been attempted, AmbassadorNym Sarah reported, her consciousness carrying the frustration of failed negotiations. The Zephyrian leadership refuses to engage in dialogue. Their cultural framework doesn't accommodate the concept of consciousness-based technological development. They interpret our capabilities as evidence of hostile intent. Dr. Kraldun's enhanced awareness manifested within their planning space, bringing with her the crystalline clarity of scientific analysis combined with human intuitive understanding. The Zephyrian fleet is operating on conventional principles of space-time manipulation. Their vessels are powerful but limited by their adherence to traditional physics. They cannot effectively target ships that exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. You're suggesting we demonstrate our defensive capabilities without engaging in direct conflict, Thornwick observed, her engineering consciousness already developing tactical applications for their consciousness-based technologies. More than that, Havenspire replied, his awareness expanding to encompass possibilities that pure military thinking couldn't achieve. We demonstrate that their entire conception of galactic warfare has become obsolete. Not through conquest, but through transcendence. The plan that emerged from their collective consciousness was unlike anything in the history of galactic politics. Rather than meeting the Zephyrian fleet with opposing force, they would transform the nature of the confrontation itself, demonstrating capabilities that rendered conventional military thinking irrelevant while avoiding any action that could be interpreted as an attack. "Begin quantum phase transition," Havenspire commanded, and across their combined fleet, human and Veltharian vessels began implementing protocols that would redefine what it meant to exist in normal spacetime. As the Zephyrian armada approached the borders of their space, they would encounter not an opposing military force but a demonstration of consciousness-based technology that would challenge their fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality itself. The age of conventional galactic warfare was about to end, replaced by something that transcended the limitations of traditional military thinking. "All ships report ready for dimensional phase shift," Grimwater announced. "The Zephyrian fleet will arrive in 17 hours. Then we have 17 hours to prepare the galaxy for its next evolutionary step," Havenspire replied, his consciousness already reaching out toward the approaching fleet with intentions that had nothing to do with conquest and everything to do with transformation. The Zephyrian armada arrived to find empty space where their intelligence reports had indicated the largest concentration of enemy vessels in galactic history. Admiral Korithval's frustration was evident in the aggressive patterns of his bioluminescent threat displays as he demanded explanations from his sensor operators. 15,000 ships cannot simply vanish, he declared, his four arms gesturing toward displays that showed nothing but the background radiation of normal space. "Our long-range sensors detected massive fleet concentrations in this sector less than 6 hours ago." What the Zephyrian commander couldn't understand was that the human Veltharian fleet hadn't vanished, it had transcended the dimensional limitations that confined his understanding of spacetime. Around his ships, existing in quantum states that rendered them invisible to conventional sensors, the combined consciousness of two civilizations prepared to demonstrate the obsolescence of traditional warfare. "Admiral," Captain Havenspire's voice spoke directly into Korithval's consciousness, bypassing his communication systems entirely. "I am Captain Zorik Havenspire of the United Earth Fleet. We have no desire for conflict with the Zephyrian Empire." The shock of direct consciousness contact sent alarm signals racing through the Zephyrian command structure. Their military protocols had no provisions for enemies who could speak directly into their minds while remaining completely undetectable by their sensor networks. "Show yourselves," Korithval demanded, his training overriding his confusion as he fell back on established military procedures. "Face us with honor if you dare." "As you wish," Dr. Corvain's consciousness joined the communication, and suddenly the space around the Zephyrian fleet filled with ships that materialized from what appeared to be the quantum foam of reality itself. The sight was beyond anything in Zephyrian military experience. Human and Veltharian vessels didn't simply appear, they seemed to unfold from dimensions the Zephyrian sensors couldn't detect, their hulls shimmering with energies that suggested existence in multiple quantum states simultaneously. More disturbing was the realization that the combined fleet outnumbered their own forces by nearly 10 to 1, despite intelligence reports that had suggested rough parity. "Impossible," breathed Korithval's tactical officer. "Our sensors still can't lock onto them. They're there, but they're also not there. We exist in states of quantum superposition," High Chancellor Kethmiran's consciousness explained, his awareness enhanced by integration with human consciousness manipulation techniques. "Your weapons cannot target what exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously." Engineer Thornwick's presence manifested within the Zephyrian command ship, her consciousness bringing with it demonstration models of the technologies they were witnessing. "Your military thinking is based on the assumption that conflict occurs within a single-dimensional framework. We operate in spaces that your physics considers impossible. What do you want?" Korithval asked, his military bravado faltering as he began to comprehend the scale of the technological gap between their civilizations. "To show you what becomes possible when consciousness evolves beyond the limitations of conventional thinking," Commander Grimwater replied, and suddenly the Zephyrian fleet found itself surrounded by displays of technology that redefined their understanding of what spacecraft could accomplish. Ships moved through spacetime in ways that violated every principle of Zephyrian engineering, folding distances through conscious manipulation of quantum mechanics while demonstrating defensive capabilities that rendered their weapons useless. More profoundly, the human Veltharian consciousness began reaching out toward Zephyrian minds, offering glimpses of awareness techniques that could transform their entire approach to existence. "You're not conquering us," Korath Val realized, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and growing understanding. "You're trying to elevate us. Consciousness cannot be forced to evolve." Dr. Kraldun's enhanced awareness joined their communication network. "It must choose transformation. We can offer possibilities, but each individual mind must decide whether to expand beyond its current limitations." The demonstration continued for hours as human Veltharian consciousness interfaced with Zephyrian military personnel, showing them technologies and awareness techniques that operated on principles their civilization had never considered. Not conquest, not destruction, but an invitation to transcend the competitive framework that had defined galactic politics for millennia. "Admiral," Havenspire's consciousness reached out one final time toward the Zephyrian commander. "Your empire can continue on its current path, maintaining military dominance through conventional force. Or it can join a transformation that will redefine what civilization can become. The choice belongs to your people." As the human Veltharian fleet phased back into quantum superposition, becoming invisible to Zephyrian sensors while remaining present in dimensional states their instruments couldn't detect, Admiral Korath Val found himself facing a decision that would determine his empire's future. Behind him, scattered across 15,000 ships, Zephyrian minds struggled to process what they had witnessed and its implications for everything they believed about the nature of reality. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had emerged from their primitive world not as conquerors but as consciousness pioneers, offering every civilization the opportunity to transcend the limitations that had defined their existence. Some, like the Veltharian, would embrace transformation. Others would resist, clinging to familiar patterns of thinking that consciousness expansion had rendered obsolete. But the seeds of change had been planted across 1,200 worlds, and consciousness, once expanded, could never truly contract back to its original limitations. The age of primitive thinking was ending, replaced by possibilities that would reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization. In the depths of space, Captain Havenspire stood once again on the observation deck of the Meridian's edge, watching distant stars that now represented not destinations to be conquered but minds to be elevated. Humanity had found its place among the galactic community, not through force or deception, but by demonstrating that consciousness itself could evolve beyond the boundaries that had confined it for so long. The future stretched ahead, vast with possibilities that no single species could imagine alone.